afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Afternoons with the Ambassador. And today we're going to be resuming our review of Babylon 5 Season 1. In this particular episode, we're going to be talking about Survivors. And with me today, as always, I've got my two good co-hosts, my two good friends, Mountains of Elysium and Adega. Gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me once again. Hope you both are doing well.
Hello.
Hello, and thanks for having us on.
You're welcome, as always. And to the chat, my moderator, Shea Storm Dragon. Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you for being here. Glad you could tune in. And I'm sure there'll be more coming in as we get started. But yeah, today we're talking about Survivors. A little bit of an easier episode, let's be perfectly candid here, because last week was a hard episode, but this one's a little bit easier. It's not quite as heavy and everything, but it's still a great episode. And yeah, I've honestly, I just rewatched this today to everything, kind of refresh my memory. And guys, where do you want to start? I open the floor.
I think it was something when I was reading up on it that this is a very good episode building for later, because in the very next episode we have the strike, and here we have Garibaldi mentioning we haven't got the funding. The dock workers are untrained. They're working 4 times harder than they have with less time to get the Cobra Bays ready for the new squadron. So it is good, really good scene and really good setting building going forward.
World building, yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. And to the chat, Mr. CCDV, welcome, sir. Thank you for tuning in. This is the last day before day weekend for me, and I won't lie to you folks, I have enjoyed it. And I hope you all take some time today to do some commemorating and whatever. And Sci-Fi Nation, welcome. Thank you for being here, sir. I appreciate it. But yeah, Mountains, you're right, because this episode does kind of build on to the next one, which we'll cover next week and everything, talking about by any means necessary. But the interesting thing about... Go ahead, David, please.
There's some other aspects of world building, because he's right, it wasn't just that. But you also get introduced into what the... it's small, but it does play a part, what basically Air Force One looks like, or the presidential cruiser, which, is later going to be blown up. You learn about the presidential security. You learn about how Garibaldi plays with others when it comes to outside security forces, and he doesn't really play very well. At the end of this season, we're going to find out it goes pretty bad. But the world building here is Earth is, again, we got the Psi Corps, and then we have the Home Guard, and now we have something wrong within the military. It's not a happy place at all.
Not particularly, no, it isn't, unfortunately. So, but yeah, this episode and everything, it's very Garibaldi centric, but obviously that's not a bad thing. And I will say this: you've got some rather shady dealings within Earth Force security, particularly people around the president, because you've got the one officer Cutter that's working with Major Kimmer or anything. And I'll say this: I would have loved to have seen her and Ivanova butt heads, because that would have been a very interesting little tussle. Let's be honest. If they decided, if it had gone a little physical, because I have a feeling. Yeah, my money's on Ivanova too, and everything. Well, not to mention, if you think about it, I think Kimmer's got a little bit of Russian in her as well, because if you think about her name, Ilyana Kimmer. So I'm just thinking, 2 Russian, very strong-willed women in this episode, both of them button heads. And more often than not, Ivanova gets a one-up on her until Kimmer decides to do a end around and everything and go over everybody's head and bring in General Netter, which, fun fact, is actually the name of one of the producers on the show, Douglas Netter, I think it is. So,
I think they actually used his photograph for the President Clark.
They might have.
As far as I think so. They did that. They used his name for one character and his photograph as the image of the president.
That's interesting. I was not aware of that. And to the chat, Happy Dinosaur 8000, welcome, sir. And I think Sci-Fi Nation, I already give you a shout out. Thank you both for being here. I do appreciate it. So, but yeah, Adega, you brought up something. Well, you both brought up a couple of interesting facts. The fact that Garibaldi doesn't always play well with others. He doesn't like other people coming into his backyard and playing with his toys. And Babylon 5 is his backyard, and his crew and everything, for lack of a better term, are his security team is his toys. And he's built that team from the ground up and everything, and he's very proud of it. And let's just be candid here. Kimmer's got a bit of a beef with Mr. Garibaldi. Unfortunately, that beef almost costs a lot of people their lives.
Well, we should go ahead and set the stage here.
Yeah.
The Cobra Bays, like you said, it blew up, and there was evidence planted on Garibaldi to try and distract from the actual bomber who actually did it. They caught the guy, but he lied about it, and Kimmer decided, oh, well, it's Garibaldi. I already hate him. It's a good excuse. He had a landing pad blow up on my dad. Why not a Cobra Bay? So the whole thing was, now Garibaldi's being framed. He knew he was going up S Creek really quickly. And something we learn about him right at that point when they find the evidence, when he takes off, is that he really, like you were saying, really does know the station. He knew where to go, how to hide, until he decided to hit the bottle again. He even went to that praying mantis dude who runs the underworld.
The draft.
For money. And the guy can do just about anything on the station. Garibaldi knew it, and yet he also knew Garibaldi was he was smart enough to know, don't deal with Garibaldi because you're going to get in trouble if you do.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, and essentially what Sci-Fi Nation, he's like, I love Garibaldi. He's a dink like me. Well, you could say that about Michael Garibaldi. The other interesting thing about this is you've got two ambassadors who actually aid in very small ways Garibaldi. One is Londo and the other is Shakar. And, I'll say this for Shakar. He's always pitching a fit about something, some little minutia piece of nothing and everything when something major is going on, when he's talking about the banquet with the president and everything. And the Narn regime is being seated next to somebody, a race called the Vree, and he's like, have you seen the Vree eat? Not pleasant. And I'm just thinking, they're in the middle of trying to figure out why a Cobra Bay exploded. You're worried about who you're going to be sitting next to during a banquet. Shakar, get your head out of your pouch.
Yes, I also found it interesting, the line when Garibaldi confronted Londo. He said, you do this to me. And what was the line? Mr. Garibaldi, do you really think I would do such a thing to you, my good and dear friend? Yeah. In a minute.
Yeah.
I said, you're right, but I didn't. I found that line really funny. And
well, go ahead.
But Londo has always been honest. Even he might portray himself as what's the line he used in one of the early ones? An old Republican dreaming of better days. And yet he is a very astute politician, but I think of all, he's the most honest, because until a few episodes from now, when he finds the eye, he's given up all hope of ever making himself something of himself or something of Centauri Prime.
Yeah, very
so
true.
Up to this point, he's still kind of the whimsical guy dreaming of better days.
Well, not only that, he tells Garibaldi, he's like, I know what it's like to be pinned. And he's like, I am doing this because I too know what it's like to be in a corner and having everything stripped away from you. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to help you out and everything. And he's like, now please leave me in peace. And Garibaldi does. He leaves him in peace. So
the interesting thing about that too was, and I took it two different ways. It depended on when I was watching it. When he gave them the Centauri ducats, and Garibaldi asked why, at first impression I got, well, he would have Garibaldi over a barrel. He would owe him. But then the second time, I actually believed the acting, as compared to when I watched it 20 years ago as to now, where he was saying, I've been where you are. And it seemed like Londo really did have genuine empathy for Garibaldi, his plight, and said, you know what, no one helped me, but I'm going to help you.
yeah, and that's the interesting thing about this. Even though the Centauri and us humans are about as dissimilar as you can get, we still have similar things about us that we can relate to. Because even though we might be different biologically and even in appearance, we still struggle with the same things in life. And I think that's
I
an
don't
interesting.
know. I kind of think that this, out of all the other races, with the failings in humanity, I think the Centauri and the humans are most alike. When it comes to, the elevated part of humanity, I would say, well, maybe we're drawing closer to the Minbari. But if you put apples to oranges, I would say that humans and the Centauri, like you said, other than physical appearance, are very, very similar.
Yeah. Well, and that was the point I was making today, is despite the biological differences between Centauris and humans, and even I mean across the board except for maybe the Vorlons, every race deals with similar things in life. We struggle with our aspirations for the future. We worry about where we want our not our just our own personal lives to go, but the greater destiny of our race to. We want to try and steer the course of our race in a positive direction. And that's an interesting thing because, granted, the Centauri are a little bit more advanced than us technologically. Technologically, they still deal with matters of ego and deal with all the same things that us humans have been dealing with since forever. And the fact that Londo does reach out to, and not just Londo, but also G'Kar, because G'Kar even goes a step further. He's like, I can get you off the station. I can get you into Narn space and keep you, and you would be safe, and you would have a place there. And G'Kar is doing it not purely for purely selfless reasons, but at the same time, he kind of is, because he sees Garibaldi as a very talented and a very gifted man and everything, and he's giving them opportunity to get his neck out of the noose.
Yeah, but Garibaldi's suspicions of everything hiding around the corner, which more often than not, he has some validity. He's learned by the hard knocks that you never trust a shadow to be just a shadow. He saw that it wasn't altruistic for the most part from him. It was they were going to use him to pull him apart and get all his little codes, his secrets, everything he knew about Earth. Yeah. And then, the last thing is, what are you going to do with me then? Once he's used up, there's not, then you're going to throw me back to the wolves.
Yeah, essentially. And so, but
honestly, though, I think the Narn would have picked him clean for information. Probably. But they would have used him. I do think they actually respected him as an operative, as a security guy, and they would have used him. And it wasn't just hoping to lure him into the back of the van. They were actually hoping they saw value in him.
Yeah. Well, they saw value in him, but they also, you have to realize about the Narn, this is true of just about every race except for maybe, I'll go out there. If y'all want to disagree, that's fine. every race on the station will seize upon an opportunity if they see a benefit for them, and that's true of the Narn, of the Centauri, and of the even to an extent the Minbari, and most definitely, obviously, the Vorlons and ourselves. So, but something I want to touch upon very briefly and everything, and this is we can do a bit of a deep dive on this if you want. Ileana Kimmer. Now, this is a woman who had known Garibaldi when she was a kid, and we get that whole backstory between Garibaldi and Sinclair and everything when he's talking about his past career and everything, and in particular when he was working, I think it was on Io and everything. He's talking about how much of a cesspool Io really was. And I can understand to a point Ileana Kimmer's position, because she does hold Garibaldi to blame for her father's death. But at the same time, she's letting that fact blind her to the bigger picture of what's actually going on around her. And, that's something that's very true nowadays, particularly when you're online and everything, on places like on YouTube and Twitter and so on. People can allow their feelings about a certain thing to blind them to the bigger picture of what's really going on. And I think that's actually I think the character of Ileana Kimmer, it gives her a lot of depth, particularly at the end of the episode where they finally figure out what's actually going on. And she's able to say, I forgive you. She's like, I screwed up too. She's like, I miss my dad. I was in pain and I've been mourning ever since. And she's like, it almost cost a lot of people their lives. And she's able to embrace Michael and everything as a friend again. So, guys, your thoughts on anything along those lines?
No, I'd agree with you there. I probably was guilty of this much more so in the past, where you get into a tribe, you get into a way of thinking, and it's no, the other guys, they're wrong. They're wrong, they're evil no matter what they do. And you take anything they do and you look for the negatives if you feel opposed to them. And I realized, and thank God my wife helped me out with this, to actually look at all things from every side. Don't just take things at face value. Don't assume. It's the old line, don't assume malice when incompetence is just as valid. And you've got to realize that the people who may be opposed to you are looking out for the very same things you are. And you see it in the Babylon 5 universe. Mm-hmm. The different races are looking out for themselves. They do things for their own gains, not often out of malice, but it could end up hurting another race or in our online world, other people. And we've got to take a step back and realize not everyone is out to get you. Not everyone is who's opposed to your particular opinion is evil. Mm-hmm. You both might want exactly the same thing, and you might just be using different language, and that could just be the problem. If you took time to talk to the other person, they're looking for the same thing you are.
Yeah.
And they may just be misjudging you. And that's something we've all been guilty of. And I suppose it's a Christian thing. If you've got to forgive others, and not just Christian, but it's good for everyone. Be ready to forgive others. And while they may not forgive you in the past, it creates a better space to work in.
Yeah.
Now, I have, of course, me, I'm the contrarian. I always had a different take on things. Mine comes from experience. And I don't mean to get too personal, but when I was 11, my next oldest brother, he was 14, passed away due to mistakes of people's judgment. And I saw everyone around me hurting, and I'm 11 years old. You don't go into a bottle when you're 11. No one asks if you need counseling, or at least they didn't when I was a kid.
Mhm.
So my solution at the time was of course, I was a Star Trek fan. I says, "Whoa, I can become Spock. Let's shut off those emotions, or hide the ones that we don't want or don't like, and you learn to push them down really deep." And this character that they have, I think, was probably more than just what you mentioned, because the way I have experienced things is based on someone or probably themselves, where the childhood trauma that isn't dealt with properly leads to other aspects of their life being misguided or skewed or directed the wrong way. And in this poor little girl, she says, well, there was this drunk and he was associated with my dad. No one told me the facts. He ran away. And my emotions, I don't know how to deal with them. So what I'm going to do is be angry instead
Yeah.
of having sorrow, and instead of experiencing the loss. It all festered up into anger, and no one taught her how to get out of that hole. And it took her years to be able to figure that out. And similar for me, it wasn't until I got married where I learned to expand my ability to feel different ways than what I had allowed myself to feel because of trauma. And more than anything, I don't think it was because there is that, don't get me wrong, there is that part of misjudgment, but I think the writer had seen this before or experienced it before and knew that these holes that these children come into will play throughout their whole lives until they can finally experience what it means to have the real expression of their sorrow or have the release of the pain that they needed to. And, you know, when she was getting ready to get back on the ship, when she's talking with Garibaldi and looking at this bruised and battered guy who she accused of horrible things,
Yeah.
it set in that, you know what? I gotta let go. I've got to grow up. There's a whole other world that I was blinded to simply because when I was a child, I didn't know how to deal with it. And all of that pain was focused in the wrong direction.
Yeah. And Adega, I can understand that as well and everything because, as I've mentioned previously, I was 7 years old when my father passed. So in a way, I can understand where Kimber was coming from because she was so young at the time when her father was so tragically killed. And it was supposed to be Michael in his place instead because that explosive charge, as Michael said, was meant for him. So he's dealing with survivor's guilt. And I think that's one of the reasons why they call this episode Survivors, because both Michael and Ileana, they're survivors of this great tragedy and they have survivor's guilt. But not only that, well, in terms of Michael, he has survivor's guilt. But Ileana, on the other hand, she's just got the pain and the anguish and everything of losing her father, who she obviously loved very deeply, and what have you. And for a long time, I even had difficulty really resolving my feelings and everything because my father was out of my life for a couple of years because of his heart condition and everything. He had to be away. So, and there was some times and everything when I had some resentment, but it wasn't necessarily at my father or any particular person really, but just for the simple fact that because of his illness, I got robbed of time with my dad. Now, granted, I did get to have some of that time back, and we did get to have some time together as father and son before he passed. But I had this resentment. It was kind of an unfocused resentment in a manner of speaking towards the medical field. And obviously, this is a very huge, massive thing. And I'm thinking, why couldn't you all have done better? If you all had just done a little bit better, my father could still be alive. If the drugs and everything, the anti-rejection drugs and everything that he was taking had been better, he could still be alive, or I could have had a few more years with him and everything. So, you wrap those two dynamics within the story and everything. And not to mention Garibaldi's dealing with his own addiction to alcohol and the fact that he had fallen into the bottle after Frank Kimmer, Ileana's father, had died. And he still struggles with alcoholism, unfortunately. And you wrap all of this around the fact that you've got the president coming in, everybody's under the gun, and there's pressure coming in from all sides. You've got Kimmer on one side, you've got the government on the other, you've got the military on the other, and everything, making sure that everything's perfect for the president's visit. And it's just like a giant pressure cooker for everyone. So it was just this it's a wonder that everybody got out of this relatively unscathed, except for the workers there in the Cobra Bay, the fighter bay, and what have you. So, and to the chat, let's talk Star Wars. Jesse, good to see you, my friend. Thank you for being here. Hope you got the puppies cleaned and what have you. So, but guys, anything you want to touch upon, anything I brought up, or just in general? So.
I was just going to say, in some ways, you don't have to be a child to feel that resentment, because I lost both of my parents around the time I was 30.
Mm-hmm.
And but my father was a long illness, so like we had time to build up. Mm-hmm. But it was like my mom's illness was missed by incompetence.
Yeah.
And you still feel resentment. I kind of realized that doctor was just basically incompetent, but you still have, and I was able to let go of that, but you still have unfocused resentment because, well, why are they gone? You lose both parents within a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and you're going, what's happening? And this was as an adult. You can just imagine that, take that back 20 years with someone who hasn't had life experience, and that will make, and I found how much it hurt me. Mm-hmm. And with somebody who has an emotional aptitude, who hasn't been through 30 years already, it's going to really crush them. And so I feel real sympathy for Kimmer.
Yeah,
position, but still it doesn't excuse her getting focused. But I think she found a focus for her rage, and it blinded her to everything. And it may have been her team, because I think I was talking with you beforehand. I thought it was, first few times I watched this, I thought it was Garibaldi's team who were firing at him. And I said, that doesn't look right, because he treats them like family. And especially how he carries on in later episodes. If they had been shooting at him when they were supposed to just bring him in, he wouldn't have been as pally, or would not have turned his back. So her team were wound up to the last, where they were shooting at Garibaldi rather than trying to bring him in. And I found that may have been down to her leadership as much as themselves.
Well, that's something where I kind of want to, because we have spent a lot of time on a character that we only see once in the entire series, where this is a massive, massive episode for Garibaldi, not just in the series, but also in the books. Mm-hmm. The man has an incredible knack that no one has recognized. The story about him where the girl's father actually died, it was all because he was making inroads where someone couldn't before. The other people that were hunting down these criminals couldn't find it, and he was figuring it out.
Yep.
And so they decided to put the screws on him, where he actually figured this out under the Presidential Security Authority. He figured it out where she couldn't. And his survival instinct, where to go, I mentioned it earlier on, but also with all these great skills that he has, he's also has his great weaknesses. This bottle thing doesn't occur just once, as we know. His life has been a tragedy all up until the very end of the series. When even after that, he still has to fight with Bester, but the man is constantly on the run, fighting or solving serious problems. He doesn't seem to get much of a break until he marries Lise at the end of the series.
Yeah. Well, and the thing you got to understand about Garibaldi, this is a guy who's been in security pretty much his entire life from one degree to another. Because if I remember correctly, his family was in law enforcement before that. And everything, because he does bring up the reference to the blue flu in the next episode, which we'll cover next week. But the Garibaldis obviously have been involved in law enforcement, and basically what is Earth Force security, but just the future equivalent of law enforcement. And Garibaldi's got a very keen detective mind. I would say he's got one of the best detective minds in science fiction, period. And he uses that and everything, even though he's like, he's been on the run for we don't know how long, several hours, maybe a day or more. They're on the station and everything. And he's got somebody that knows him extremely well personally, who knows all of his knows all his tricks, all his tactics, and pretty much has got him cornered there on the station. And the thing that is amazing about this is, even though he does eventually get caught, his brain's still working. It's still trying to figure out what the hell's going on here and everything. And ultimately, he's able to get this massive catastrophe and everything averted. So that's a testament to Garibaldi himself and everything, and the lifetime that he's had in the law enforcement field. I mean, I've got an uncle and everything who has been retired for numerous years and everything from law enforcement himself. But you never lose that instinct. And even though they take his link, they take his badge, and they take his sidearm, his security codes, and his gun, he's still got the mindset. And honestly, oftentimes that's all you really need is the skill to keep that skill set as a lawman, let's talk Star Wars or anything just brought up.
It makes me wonder if Straczynski has had problems like this in the past, because I know most of us had, where you have betrayal. And this repeats over and over again. Garibaldi, in a few episodes ahead, gets shot in the back by one of his own officers. Yep. This major, her lead officer, is the betrayer for her. For Sheridan and Sinclair, both of them, it's the Vorlons that betray them. It's you never know when you're close or when you trust, or whoever was a writer had to have seen his own trust, or if it was a woman that wrote, I don't know who all wrote these episodes. I never looked it up. I know Straczynski did most of the others, but
yeah. I think it was Mark Zickrey wrote this one.
But there's betrayal hidden in plain sight over and over and over again.
Yep.
I don't know if it's supposed to be just to make good television, a cautionary tale, or someone's expression of their disappointment with people that they've known in the past. But either way, it's not a theme that goes away in this series.
Yeah, very true. Sci-Fi Nation today, the best narrator I've ever heard. Yes, I would wholeheartedly agree with you, sir. Wholeheartedly. But yeah, and just a little bit of a pet peeve that I have, and I know it's done deliberately. Every time something doesn't go her way, she's like, I'm head of presidential security and I can exercise presidential authority, and you're just like, will you shut the hell up? just a little bit of a nitpick. You just like, you want to haul off and just, I do not advocate nor do I support striking a woman. But I would love to see Vav like paste her across the mouth just once. But that's just me. That's a little thing.
I think we've all felt had those kind of bureaucrats where they say, "Do you know who I am?"
Mm-hmm.
And I often want to say, "Yes, I can read your nameplate."
You know, there was one time I was climbing up in the mountains, and I've never seen a honey badger, but I have seen a badger, and it was climbing up the hill towards me, and I'm standing there. I've had experience with all kinds of wild animals, but this one I remember very vividly, and I
Mhm.
thought, you know, I'm the human in this argument here, and that little badger said, I don't care. I'm going to chew your leg off. And it kept charging at me. You know,
Mhm.
there's sometimes when it doesn't matter what your authority is. That pit bull or that honey badger or whatever the wild boar that chased me one time, they're going to do a number on you. And the major learned that don't pick on Ivanova, regardless of your rank or who you know. Or I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, that is. Well, and to kind of get back on track, I mean, we've everything to get back to kind of delve back into the episode. You get the impression, Jesse. Let's talk Star Wars. Brought this up. The men that worked for Garibaldi were extremely loyal to him and everything, and they weren't going to take crap and everything further and everything because they felt like their chief was getting crapped on here. And even Lou Welch, who's there and everything when Garibaldi's quarters are being searched, and they come up with that stuff and everything, those blueprints and those Centauri ducats. And I think there's even a moment there where Welch is like, "Wait a minute, something ain't right. Something's off here." Because Garibaldi's many things, he might be a hard head and he might be a hard nose, but he's not. He's not a traitor.
I like the fact that,
Mhm.
and I only picked this up the last few times I've watched this, that even though Liana outranks Garibaldi,
Mhm.
Lou waited until Garibaldi gave him the okay to leave. He wasn't going to accept her orders at all.
Yeah,
So
because
Lou Welch is really loyal to Garibaldi, and we see that in a lot of other episodes.
Sci-Fi Nation, a ducat is kind of like it was actually an old currency that we use here on Earth and everything way back in the day. It's basically like a gold coin or a silver coin or something like that, and everything that has a lot of value to it and everything. And something that's the Centauri still use hard currency. They don't just use credits or anything or a credit chip or what have you. So, but yeah, and that's the other thing. Sinclair is having none of Kemmer's guff. He's like, I'm commander here. This is my station. Garibaldi's my security chief. I'll say this. He's like, when he makes the comment, I'll shove you at the nearest airlock. So, but it's just everybody gets fed up with Kemmer and her crap and everything at one point or another. And they're going, Ivanova and Sinclair are going close to court-martialable offenses and everything to protect Garibaldi. And you know what? I can't say I necessarily blame him. I would do the exact same thing for Garibaldi. So honestly, it's just Sci-Fi Nation. We'll get to that episode when we get to it. Yeah, too soon. Way too soon. We're not even near that yet, my friend.
I love that Ivanova. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I love that Ivanova put the maintenance cycle to check the communications to prevent Kemmer from getting backup from Earth Force to give Sinclair the time to help Garibaldi. So she really did push, even though she did it within. It's like that later episode where you did everything within the law. However, it's the same thing. She did the illegal thing, but it was a very dangerous thing for her, and I admire that within Ivanova.
There's also the thing too with Sinclair is that granted, some of the security forces and different scanners and things were shut down. He was the one who found Garibaldi first. Granted, he ran off, but single-handedly, without the help of other people, he was able to find where his friend was. And I thought, you know what? Well, one of these days I'll talk about instinct on 40's channel, but it was pretty it was a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, and the amazing thing about this episode is you do see a little bit of that structure and that trust start to break down after Sinclair leaves and everything, because Garibaldi doesn't quite trust Sheridan as much as he did trust Sinclair and everything, and you start to see that antagonism rise and everything. But right here, this is much like the dynamic on Star Trek in terms of the TOS and even TNG. You've got Sinclair, you got Ivanova, you got Garibaldi, and then of course you've got to a certain degree. You've also got Franklin, but you could even put that dynamic and everything of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy alongside Sinclair or Sheridan and Ivanova and Garibaldi and everything. And that same thing. And I guess in Star Trek, it would be Picard, Riker, and maybe Troy, Counselor Troy. And that's one of the really neat things about this episode is you see that group dynamic and you see it play out and everything. And even though Garibaldi's been removed from active service, there's still Sinclair and Ivanova are still going to go to bat, or not. Yeah, Sinclair and Ivanova are still going to go to bat for Garibaldi, regardless of what some little piddly major and everything and her team and everything are going to try and do to the guy.
You know, too, also, they had the added advantage, and you probably just heard Alec Peters had done Mira Furlan interview.
Oh,
Patricia Tallman.
I watched both of them. I was like, oh my gosh.
Right. Here's the thing. These people were close to each other on and off the set. And they were still friends as long as they were, they were the ones that were still alive, even the ones that had passed away, they were friends with the whole time. And to have that camaraderie on camera makes it that much more believable and that much more easier to be accepted by the audience. I thought it was just whoever started that camaraderie on the set, and I don't know if it was Straczynski, the producer, one of the producers, one of the directors, or it just came natural to them. That was a good group of people, and they bonded, and it made it so much more believable when they got on camera that, well, off camera, Garibaldi and Ivanova were cracking jokes and busting people up right and left, and then when they get on camera, they could play well together, except Patricia Tallman and who did Ivanova. Her name slips my mind right now. I guess they had to separate each other all the time because they kept making each other laugh and they'd never get the work done. But it makes the show have a heart besides just the acting. At least I think so.
So
I think there's a lot of stories about pranking going on behind the scenes. It's how Londo ended up with his hair. That as a prank, he put a big set of hair, and Straczynski said bigger. He went, okay. And then they both thought they were serious. So that is literally how the Centauri ended up looking how they do. Pretty much as a prank that went wrong.
Yeah, essentially. So, but yeah, and that's the great thing about, and I'll give Alec Peters over on Aries Studios props for this. He's been able to get two very well-known actors, or rather actresses, from Babylon 5 to come on his channel and him interview them. And for me, yeah, initially it was the geek out factor, but at the same time, I was listening to them talk about their experiences on the show and everything. And Alec, if you ever catch this stream, thank you for what you're doing for us that are Babylon 5 fans. We appreciate it immensely. So, Sci-Fi Nation, hang your head in shame. You call yourself a fan of sci-fi and you go, meh?
Nuh-uh. Oh my word, sci-fi. I held you in such high regards. What the?
Sci-fi?
I'm going to have to go see if the sun is still yellow.
Kick you off. I can kick you out of the chat. All I gotta do is give Shay the go ahead. I'll have her kick you out and everything for being a hateful little troll. I'll do it. I can exercise that authority. I am the ambassador here.
I give it to you there, Sci-Fi. The way he does interviews can lead a lot of help, because there's an awful lot of the time where Alec will talk more about himself than about the guest that he has on. But I'll give you that. But
yeah,
he had a great opportunity there.
He did. So okay.
I'm actually looking forward to the just an aside. A lot of the Babylon 5 crew are working on a new sci-fi show, and I'm actually quite hopeful for that.
What?
They're working, was it the Space Command, Mark Sickery's show he's trying to crowdfund for himself. Was it Mira Furlong, Bruce Boxleitner, Bill Mummy, and I think there's one or two other actors from Babylon 5 also, with Robert Picardo from Trek and General Martok. I can't think of his name. JD Hurts. Oh, I can't think of his name. Whoever's the actor who plays
J.G. Hertzler.
He's also coming on board for it. So I'm hopeful for that, because they do seem to have some of the same dynamic from what I've seen of the pilot.
Mind.
Well, that's true. I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard about, watched some of the interviews, read about the dynamic. They're going to have a good show once it gets going.
Oh my!
And Mark Sickery does really good kind of talks to the fans. He has live chats once a week or so, and where he talks to the fans about the show. And
right, I've seen those. Yeah,
I am really hopeful for it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you guys can continue. I am going to have to step out, get a couple things taken care of before I run away. And
well, honestly, I think we've covered this episode pretty thoroughly. So, Adega, we'll go ahead and wrap up, because we're just a little over 45 minutes, and there's not much else we can really talk about on this episode. So we'll go ahead and close out here and everything. And because I've got some things I got to take care of as well. I do just want to send out a quick reminder this evening and everything on Let's Talk Star Trek's channel. We'll be talking about our favorite episodes of from TNG, The Next Generation. So be sure to tune in for that. I will be send out the link and everything on Twitter and everything. So be sure to tune in for that. And this weekend and everything, we'll got a couple things coming up this weekend over on Stone Loki's channel with Loki's Mornings of Mischief. As far as I know, unless he tells me otherwise, they're going to be doing a watch party of Young Frankensteins, and I will be participating in that. And then, of course, this weekend on my channel, we're going to be on the Ambassador Wing, 7:30 Central Time. We're going to be talking about the films of Mr. Zack Snyder, so be sure to tune in for that. So I want to thank my guests, Mountains of Elysium and Adega, for being here again this afternoon. I appreciate it. To everybody that's been in the chat, I appreciate y'all being here. For those of you that will catch us on the replay, make sure you hit that like and share button and everything. Send this out to all your friends that are fans of Babylon 5. And until next time, it's the Ambassador signing off.